This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment Podcast. And what's really nice about this week's guest, this is somebody who's actually been sat in your shoes as a listener herself, I think possibly since we started the podcast back in 2020. And we've got to know each other. We've spoken a few times, and I am so excited for you to get to know her as well. So this is Lindsay, and she's Director at NXT Recruitment. Welcome today, Emma. How are you?
Thank you, Leisha. I'm very good. Thank you. It's an honour to be with you. As you say, I've been a huge fan of yours and this show and your personal brand for a long time. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. So for those who are not yet familiar with you, but they will be by the end of this episode, just give us a little brief history of you and the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So NXT, we're a local independent recruitment partner. We are based in Carlisle, and I work in partnership with businesses throughout the whole of Cumbria and South West Scotland. What's different about us that we are a multi-sector recruitment agency. So we work with businesses of all shapes and sizes, and I recruit at all levels as well, from entry-level positions right through to managing director and C-suite. I know we're going to talk a little bit about it today, but we really pride ourselves on putting the personal touch into recruitment and the human element into recruitment as well, getting to know the people behind the CV and the businesses in depth as well. So
yeah, we definitely will. And for anyone listening who has never actually been to the United Kingdom, where Emma is based is absolutely beautiful. It's just on the cusp of the Lake District, isn't it, Cumbria? So it's just a beautiful part of our amazing country, and you should definitely, and if you are based in the UK and you haven't been, you really should come and stay. It's just an absolutely glorious place. So thank you for that lovely explanation. I mean, we could talk about a lot of things, and we will definitely come on to talking about that, but I think one of the things that really sets you apart as a leader is that you are really sort of very active in talking to young talent and young people, particularly those who are going through sort of career transition, looking at sort of how they present themselves on social media, on LinkedIn, but also CV writing. So just give us an overview as to why you do that, because I think it's really good to contextualize it. And then I want to sort of come on to what role you think we can play as recruiters in advising the next generation, because I think we're on the cusp of potentially quite big change with things like AI, Chat GPT, even the metaverse, which I know we're quite a way off that, but these are all really hot topics right now in recruitment. So let's set the scene first of all, and then let's talk about the future, I guess.
No, absolutely. So I came into the recruitment industry in 2015, and from the start, I was able to go into schools and able to speak to young people about their career aspirations. And I think one of the key reasons why I wanted to get heavily involved in that side is because I remember growing up as a teenager. I don't recall anybody coming into my secondary school and talking to me about what opportunities were available for young women in the county, and what opportunities are really on your doorstep. And especially in Cumbria, we talk a lot about the skills shortage, and we talk a lot about attracting talent to the county and retaining the talent that we've got in the county as well. And as I say, nobody ever sat me down and told me that about a career, in engineering or women in nuclear. So I find it really interesting to be able to go in and have those conversations with the young people, and you really never know who you are actually inspiring. And as well, I speak with a whole host of different types of businesses from different sectors. And for me, a key element of getting your recruitment strategy right is getting to, targeting these young people and making them aware of who you are and your brand and what opportunities you can offer them. And it's, attracting talent at that young age and making them, as I say, really that's where you should be. That's where your talent pool is. That's
of course it is. I don't think many people go into that. I don't think they go into schools. Maybe they go and do the milk rounds at university, but actually you're going in while they're still studying in, the curriculum in education. What sort of, and I know this is going to sound a little bit generic potentially, but as a general culture, what are young people feeling? Because they've gone through the most transformative period, I think, since they say the Second World War, with the pandemic, having to be forced to be taught from home. I'll talk about my own personal experience as the mother of two teenagers, but what feedback are you getting from young people? Are they feeling connected to the world of work? What's the vibe?
It's very, very mixed. I know with one I work with in particular, they try to do things virtually, which again is very active and the topic of conversation today. And throughout the pandemic, they try to do things through your work experience, which is online, or virtual mock interview sessions. But they lose that that human element to it. It becomes quite cold and quite staged when it is online. For some feedback that we've had are that there are much more people wanting to actually apply for apprenticeships rather than wanting to go to university, which is really interesting, especially when you think of, industry, and you think, as I say, of that skill shortage. It's getting people into working with the employer and, as you say, doing the apprenticeship with them. But there's definitely that disconnect, without a doubt. Yeah, it is. It's such a challenging time for young people.
It's good to hear that you're getting that feedback though around the apprenticeship schemes, particularly within STEM. We actually had a previous guest on, Sebastian. He focuses purely on STEM, and actually he's again, like yourself, a leader in recruitment, working with local employers to really educate them that that's going to be where the future talent pool, people, and I'm sure you'll corroborate this, that young people, the thought of sort of putting themselves into debt, in inverted commas, to go and do a degree where they might still not actually know where they want to go after that an apprenticeship scheme sort of gives you, I guess, the valuable vocational skills, as well as, allowing you to try before you sort of set your whole career on that path. So that's something that schools are really advocating as well, in partnership with you as an employer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing a lot more of it now as well with the skills fair. There's a skills fair every year in Carlisle, and that more and more employers are showing engagement, more and more are actually attending and exhibiting at the skills fair as well. So it's brilliant to see that employers are trying to get involved with people at such an early stage as well.
It's good. You mentioned just earlier on that when you were at school, they didn't really talk to you about, you as a girl going into engineering or construction. So given that, we are a hotbed for talking about diversity and inclusion, certainly as a podcast, we're huge supporters of it. What is then the reality in schools with these young people? Do they recognise within themselves their own diversity? And do they feel included when they go to, as a young girl, would you have felt included if you were going into an apprenticeship scheme for construction or engineering? So what's the reality for these young people?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more to be done, but there is definitely work being done as well. So I know with employers that I speak to, as well as part of my role, I do a voluntary role with the LEP, where I am an enterprise advisor. Basically, I open up my little black book of contacts to the business world and encourage business owners and leaders to go into the schools and, to do talks, to do assemblies, to tell people about the opportunities that they've got in the business. Not just, it can be an engineering business, but actually, do you want to do HR within engineering?
Yes.
Or do you do project management within this business? So it's really educating people on, the whole host of different types of roles that are available to them. But going back to it, I think by somebody going in there, and actually it's a real person going in and talking to them about the opportunities and sharing their story. How did they get into that? What did they need? Where did they study? And giving a real life case study to these young people, I think, is the key difference, because that's what it makes it feel real to them.
It absolutely it does. And I think, we just mentioned the word disconnect there, and I just want to say to anybody that's listening that is in education as a teacher, you deserve awards and medals and trophies. We absolutely do not hold you culpable. We know that you're doing your absolute best on very limited resources, but as an educational culture, certainly in the UK, I don't know if it's different in other countries, I do think there's a really big disconnect between what the reality of the world of work actually is to what they're still, the curriculum that was probably a curriculum that I went through in 1980s. I don't think it will have changed a huge amount in terms of how you go about getting a job with the careers advisors that they have in it, which is why I think bringing external people in, well, how did you become a fire person? How did you get into engineering? How do I go about becoming an AAT qualified accountant rather than going and doing a degree? I think it's the best way to do it. So I think that's wonderful. So that's through an enterprise council, did you say?
It's through the LEP. So there's a whole host. There's an organisation called the Careers Hub as well. So there are quite a few business people locally that do it, and you're assigned to a school. So I'm actually assigned to the secondary school that I went to. So it's more personable as well, because again, going in there and being, especially because the contacts that you've now got, where some of these people have gone to, and so where there's some fantastic businesses in Cumbria. So to be able to reach out to people and say, did you go to Trinity? Can you come in and have a chat? Just have a speak to these young people about what you've done and how you got there. It's really, it's inspirational for them.
And the reason we really wanted to talk about that is because every single listener that's choosing to listen to this episode right now, as you sit here right now, whether you are a recruiter starting out, which we get a lot of feedback on that, whether you're a leader, whether you're a recruiter that's been doing it 20 odd years like me, you have got something to offer to young people, whether it's going back to your old secondary school. I've done that loads, and I tell you,
Yeah.
it's so rewarding, apart from anything just to walk in, and it always seems much smaller than it did when you were
Yeah.
at school for some reason, even though I've not grown anything since I left. But I do think you can do an awful lot. Even if I always say you can impact one young person's life by just getting them to think maybe a bit more laterally about what they could do, or just even if it is getting that proverbial black book out and connecting them to somebody. I really like to think that this podcast has an impact on the next generation of people, and you and I both know, if you're sort of engaging with them, and as I mentioned before, I'm the mother to two, this generation have gone through the most catastrophic 3 years. It's been very disruptive, and they need all the help they can get. Let's stop calling them the flaky generation. Let's stop calling them the TikTok generation. They are actually probably the loneliest young people that we've ever known. And we've got to do what we can to help them. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing that. So I think if anyone has an action point today, go and contact your old secondary school and just go and sit with some young people, go and do that and add something. Now, we did allude to it in the introduction, and actually off camera, Emma and I were waxing quite lyrically, I think, about the sandstorm that's all around us, which isn't going anywhere. And I think, even Emma's got some insight into, she's sort of had a little bit of a play herself with, I guess, how we're going to be utilising artificial intelligence and machine learning as what I would like to say is we're traditional recruiters. We're relationship led. We're all about connecting human beings. You talk about human beings. So where do you see, with putting the context back in the next generation, you're mentoring and coaching, when you do the external stuff with schools, are they talking about it in schools? Are they talking about Chat GPT? What about metaverse? What do we now as recruiters and then employers need to do to make sure that we're utilizing all this new technology, but also not losing that human element?
I think that's key, isn't it? I think it's making sure, because as you say, I class myself as very traditional in the way that I communicate. I'd much rather pick up the phone than send an email or send a message. Whereas I think the younger generation, they get a lot of flack for not wanting to do that. And again, it's almost been pushed on them. Technology has been pushed on them, that they communicate via apps, they communicate via messenger, via text, and especially in an era where, as you say, they've gone through so much that they're sometimes not the most confident on the phone or actually speaking face to face to a person, and they haven't had to be in that situation. But again, for me, I think it's about being able to always keep that human element. Where you can, pick up the phone, where you can, sit down with somebody and have a coffee, especially where you've got these young people that need that personal interaction, and that's where you're going to get the best out of people. But I think as a recruiter, I think it's key that we move with the times. We need to keep evolving, don't we? Yep. I think we need to stay ahead of the curve, because otherwise we'll get swept away. We need to be aware of what's going on out there. And I know that I've been doing a little bit of research recently into the metaverse, into AI, into VR. And I think the key things are seeing the positives of it, seeing the benefits of it, because there are some huge positives to it, especially for those that are recruiting remotely, or for those that need to, and you can still then get across the brand of the business that you're recruiting for. Or you spoke to a client actually just last week, and they were talking about recruiting for a role, and they wanted people to send videos in. And again, to me, that was quite new, whereas for some businesses, they've been doing that for a little while. They use that video screening. And again, for some, I think it's quite sector specific, because for some roles and for some generations, that's great. People will be able to do that and they'll run with it. But for others, I know, for a certain generation, or for those that aren't really into technology, for others, that could actually, we could lose those really good candidates because they're not able to do that. But if it's not relevant for their role, do they really need to be able to do it as well?
And that's where, as recruiters, we need to ensure that we're being inclusive to those people, because it could be a neurodiverse thing that they're not happy to do a video, and that's something that we need to then educate and potentially, consult the client on. But I think it's really open and honest of you to admit that, and I think that it will resonate with a lot of people. We're doing this now on a video on technology. This is the irony. We don't want to make ourselves sound like dinosaurs, because we're definitely not. I think what you're saying is that there has to come a point where we all have to, I guess, compromise the preference, which will always be, for me, as a true recruitment consultant, I would much rather have an engagement, meet people, but it's not always possible. There are lots of recruiters that work, we will come on to this, but that work a global market. And the way I see it, I mean, we have got metaverse at home. We've got the VR goggles and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, when I used to do engineering recruitment back in the 90s and I was pitching a client to an engineer, can you imagine if they could literally put the headset on and walk around the plant and see the conveyor system and see, you know, or see whatever the environment. And that could be the same for a legal office. It could be the same for a recruitment office, you know. Yeah. I genuinely have been a total consumer with it, I have to be honest with you. But I know and think about, we're going back to education. Can you imagine putting on the VR goggles and being back in, you know, the Roman times or being in the medieval period? It would just be an immersive experience that you would never. And that's where I think Chat GPT won't ever replace that experience element to communicate that, in terms of whether that's through a recruiter explaining a job description or whether a client potentially, you know, trying to attract a future employee.
Absolutely. And there's a whole benefit as well for, you know, for the onboarding side as well, and then the training as well, especially for those that are working remotely, because you hear of such disconnect. And we done homework and obviously throughout the pandemic, but again, me being me, I love to be in the office with people. I love to feel like I'm part of the team, and I know that the team in the office feel like that as well. And it's great for those that can work remotely, but wouldn't it be great to be able to give that person who is working remotely, give them the same experience that they could have in the office, and people feel really included and make them really, you know, feel part of the culture and part of that team.
Definitely. So, it's really nice to hear. And I think, you know, when we set out to have the conversation about this, I know that we were both very clear that we're both definitely firmly in the more traditional camp. But actually, I think that's where your business has evolved and is evolving. And so has mine, in that, you know, you can't possibly try and just do things the way they've always been done, because otherwise you will. And there'll be plenty of people listening that are either working for employers that are set in their ways and aren't thinking about what's ahead, because I think you've got to be open-minded to it. And it's really nice to hear that from somebody like yourself that openly admits, you know, I'm a traditional recruiter, but we're looking at how we can incorporate that for a positive reason. Because actually, I think that, and I've had other guests on where we've talked about it, this isn't to replace human beings, this is to enhance the human experience. In the same way we use our smart speaker now to quickly just get a recipe for Thai curry, or to tell us the name of that person on the song that we can't remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we were to look back, you know, 5-10 years ago, that would have seemed so alien to be able to actually do that, wouldn't it? If somebody said that you could just ask your speaker a question, you wouldn't have believed it. So it's exciting. It's a really exciting time.
I love how we're not using her name, because we know that she'll start talking. So definitely, she has been known to do that before when I've said somebody's name. So you mentioned in your introduction that you are, you know, you're a business that's very focused on a sort of particular geographical area, but actually you're multi-sector. And I think, again, if I think of it, you know, I've been the most privileged host, I think, in recruitment, because I get to talk to amazing recruitment leaders like yourself every week. That a lot of people talk down the niche route, but you very proudly said, you know, we're multi-sector. So I think, again, that's quite a traditional viewpoint of the market, but I know plenty of people, certainly in my locations around Lancashire and Greater Manchester, and they're very, very successful and they're very sought after. So how do you see that positioning versus being a niche? I mean, where do you see your model going forward?
I think with us, we're Carlisle based, and there's so much opportunity in Cumbria and South West Scotland that I feel if we were to limit ourselves to just one particular sector, I think it would be limiting for us. And it sounds really cliche, I don't claim to be the expert in my client's industry by any means, but I do aim to be in mine. And, you know, I fully immerse myself in what I do, commit so much time and resource to my clients. I feel like I am part of their business, and a lot of my clients would give that feedback as well. So I think it's about, you know, it's about giving them that commitment to your client. It's about having that thirst for knowledge as well. So actually immersing yourself in, you know, as I say, I've got a number of engineering businesses, manufacturing businesses, and I truly care about what they're doing. I truly care about what their plans are for the next 12 months, the next 3 years. You know, what are you working on at the moment? What projects are you working on? And I really champion them as well. So when they're shouting about things on social media, I too am their biggest fan. You know, I want to, you know, it's about working. Again, it gets chucked around a lot, doesn't it, the word partnership in recruitment, but for me it's a true partnership. So I feel that if you work with that ethos in mind, if you share those values, and if you have that respectful relationship with your client, regardless of what industry they're in, and because I recruit at all levels within that business, so I recruit, you know, the office functions, the HR team, the engineers, I can, it's applying the same discipline to when I'm recruiting for an accountancy practice or for a legal practice. So long as I truly understand the client's business and understand what they need from that person, I can go out and find them.
I was just about to say, it gives you almost, I think, if I think about that versus very niche people, what having that sort of multi-sector or multidiscipline view is that you have a more holistic view of a business. Absolutely. Which actually, if we're thinking about attracting diverse talent pools, means that you've probably got a broader perspective. If I'm giving the counter argument. And I do think there's a place in the market for all styles of recruitment, but I think, you definitely do it with aplomb. There's no doubt about it. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. I want to end by going full circle by asking if you could go back to Emma sat in high school. How many years ago? I don't think it looks like it's that long ago, but it's quite a few years ago, I bet you're going to say. What one piece of advice would you give to her and why?
I've thought long and hard about this and for multiple reasons, but I'd say be brave and be bold, because you don't get anywhere by, sitting back and, I think it's about being brave, being bold. Taking my career, when I look back at kind of how I joined the industry in 2015, nobody talked about the recruitment industry back in those days in Cumbria. And when I joined, it was all brand new to me. And as I say, I fully immersed myself in the industry and I've learned a lot in that time. But I think it's about making key decisions. It's about being vulnerable, which kind of, I've just said be brave and be bold, but I think
being vulnerable is actually being brave. Actually, because it's opening up to what you think you need to learn about yourself and what you can then do to take yourself forward from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially in this market as well, I think it's about being, I think we've touched upon it, about, being brave and be bold, but with your personal brand as well. Especially with what we do, it's about people really understanding you, because again, another cliche, people buy from people, and people really truly do want to know who they're working with now, and especially over the last couple of years, it's all about that relationship that you have with your client and that you have with your candidate. And I think it's about putting yourself out there and for people to truly understand who you are and why you do what you do. So be brave and be bold.
I love that. I think that's a really beautiful way to end it. Well, I knew you'd be wonderful, and I told you. I said it'd fly, didn't I? I said it just goes like the blink of an eye. We're really grateful to you, and it'd be interesting to see whether or not there's any other people listening who do what you do and go into local schools and really champion young people into carving out whatever career they want for themselves. Because let's face it, the world is their oyster, but they've also had, like I say, a really challenging time. So let's do what we can to support them. But you've been amazing, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast.
Thank you, Leisha.